Hello and welcome. She traded sand for snow and a comfortable life in the booming United Arab Emirates for the challenge of an arduous trek to the top of the world. This week on One on One, meet the first Arab woman to the North Pole, Ilham Al Qasimi. It's a daunting task for fit, seasoned explorers and adventurers. So for a small, slim Arab woman in her 20s, a polar expedition raised that many more questions. Ironically, Ilham Al Qasimi's home in Dubai in the UAE has desert heat and sand, but she was now struggling against the forces of nature on a beautiful but deadly landscape of snow and ice on an unsupported expedition using only skis and pulling sleds. Battling exhaustion, both physical and mental, she drew on her extensive training and natural determination. On April the 23rd, 2010, Ilham and her team stuck their skis upright in the snow at exactly 90 degrees latitude, as indicated by their GPS. With the UAE flag in hand, Ilham Al Qasimi became the first Arab woman to reach the top of the world. Ilham, I'm delighted to speak with you.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
Tell me what really, you're a young woman who's achieved a lot, and we'll get onto those in a moment, but tell me what motivates you. What is it that really drives you?
I think there's definitely a thirst for life that I have. It's, wow, I can't classify what motivates me overall, but it is generally a common thread that is related to understanding myself better, improving myself, and doing things that mean we're not really pausing to say, okay, I'm done now. I feel far too young to pause and relax and say I'm done. I feel like there's always one more thing that I need to do, and so my sights are always looking forward, but at the same time trying to enjoy the moment.
To what degree, and I'll get to your background in a second, but to what degree do you feel limited being an Arab woman in a world where there's still a lot of misconceptions about what Arab women can and can't do?
I think everyone has limitations, and everyone's limitations are, no one's is greater or harder or easier than the next. It's appropriate for them, and it's a question of whether you want to face them and see them as a challenge that one must overcome in order to accomplish your dreams, or you stop in front of them and say, oh well, I guess I can't do anything about it. And there isn't one bit of me that views limitations as something to stop me. It's something to grow through, and it's an opportunity to learn.
Well, let's get to how you got to where you are. You were actually born in Dubai, but your parents were living and working in the USA at the time. They'd happened to come back. So you didn't really know Dubai as a child, did you?
No, I moved back here when I was 12, but there was such fond memories of it. I would come back every summer, and I would see my extended family, my cousins, and I loved it. And much as I love my life in the US and the opportunity to grow up in an international community, I missed my family and my country as well.
So. Tell me about those early years, though, in the US. What do you remember of those?
They were extremely formative. I had a fantastic childhood. We grew up in the South, so it's a very warm culture that I grew up around, not too different to the culture here. And I think my parents did a fantastic job of helping us manage being a minority and being different out there, and helped us understand and come to love our culture and our religion, and at the same time appreciate what was going on around us and appreciate the culture and the customs that we were growing up with.
Tell me about how your adjustment to the USA at the age of 12. That's kind of a sensitive age. You're just pre-teen, just turning into a teenager, and you're coming to a totally different environment. How did you adjust when you moved back?
It was definitely very hard. I think one of the biggest barriers was language, so my Arabic was not very strong. Because we were educated in the US, my parents saw my eldest sister struggle with the education system because of the language, so they spoke to me in English. Although I was hearing Arabic around me, I just wasn't accustomed to communicating it or expressing myself in Arabic.
And in terms of dress too, because when you come back to the Middle East, and the UAE is fairly liberal in so many ways, but it also has a conservative undertone.
Yes.
And you're part of a family that's from the culture here. You're Emirati, so you had to think about wearing an abaya and covering yourself more. Tell me about that adjustment.
Well, I was young, so I think it was harder on my elder sisters than on myself. It's a culture of conformity, so people have different reasons for dressing in the traditional custom, but it would make quite a bold statement if you didn't. And it's a statement that you probably are not intending on making. So I think from that perspective, one understands. As a teenager, it was definitely pretty hard because you're trying to fit in. Any teenager anywhere in the world suffers the adolescence crisis where they want to belong and they want to fit in. And so definitely when you suddenly have to change so many elements, not just the way you dress, it's not easy. But today, I much as I love traveling abroad and the times that I'm not wearing the full Arab custom, I love wearing it now. It's part of my custom, it's part of my culture, it's a reflection of a certain amount of morality, and I appreciate that.
Tell me about your parents and how they influenced you. Your father was a civil engineer.
Yeah.
And in terms of his character, of course, he worked in the States for so many years. How did he what influence did he have on you?
Well, he was studying in the US, so he did his master's and his PhD there, and it was a research degree, which is why we lived there for so long. I'm very similar to my father. I'm very close to him, and he's over time become more a friend and a trusted person. He'll always be my father, but there's an utmost amount of respect for him in that way. But he is definitely a profound influence on my life. He has a rationality to how he approaches things, and whilst he is conservative and religious, in meeting him you would see how approachable he also is, and how compassionate he can be. So it's those elements in him that I draw on and also that I relate to quite a lot. My mother, I think, when I look at her context and the world she grew up in, she stood out. And within her context, she's quite progressive. She lived in the US in a time when so much of the debate was around women's rights, especially housewives, and issues of domestic violence, and she was taking all of this in and raising us to sort of say, okay, never make X mistake, always stand up for this right of yours. And while she is traditional for her own time, she was quite progressive, and for that, I can't fault them. I can't fault my parents.
Also, the time you came back to the UAE, it wasn't quite as developed as it is nowadays. So, of course, times have changed. And when you look back at coming to what was much more of an underdeveloped place, certainly in terms of infrastructure, coming from the US, how was that? Did you notice that as a youngster, as a 12-year-old?
In all honesty, I loved it because, when I grew up, the front gates of our house were open and our front door was never locked, and people were welcome to come in and just join our evening meal, and they did, and that's how we lived. And all our neighbors, we all knew each other by first name, and we grew up with their kids, and we're probably related in some distant way, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. The US was fantastic, and people were very warm and welcoming, but there was clearly that boundary. I never went into strangers' houses, and my mom was very careful which friends I could visit, and would prefer always that they would come over, and there are these kinds of boundaries that existed that suddenly weren't there anymore when we moved back. So I love the Dubai that I saw as a child. I'm proud of what it is now, but I definitely miss that sense of warmth and community that we had back then.
When you think about how you'll try to maintain the elements of culture that you appreciate so much as you've been describing, what would you like to impart down the road to your own children and their children? What would you like them to be able to retain about being Emirati?
It's a sense of humanity, and it's consistent across cultures. If people remember it, it's nothing that I can assign only to my culture, and I carry it forward with me in my life as I live abroad. In the 5 years I've lived in London, if I see an old person drop his change, I'll pick it up for him, and be it as it may, his son is standing there and doing nothing. That's a part of my custom, and I can't own it. It's universal. It's a sense of humanity and justice in the world, and I think I will teach my kids exactly that.
Interestingly enough, your parents had a couple of children after they moved back. Yeah. So your younger siblings actually have a different sense and perspective, when it comes to the USA and the UAE. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the difference, how they are different.
It's profound, and for me it's almost like a little experiment, because not only has the context changed, my parents are in a different life stage. So to see the same parents and to see them interact with their children in slightly different ways, really eye-opening. And I think they're growing up in the Middle East in a time of profound change, and you can take that in a couple of ways. You can lash out and try and be from a customer culture that you're not. You can become very protective and inward looking and defend your own culture very, very strongly, or you can be curious and you can take a little bit from everything that's going on around you. And that's what I'm trying to push them towards. But definitely, although people might think they had a more sheltered upbringing, I would say my two elder siblings and I had a more sheltered upbringing, although we were in the US.
Well, you broke free from that shelter and went on a rather unique expedition, which we're going to get onto in just a moment. We have more one-on-one with Ilham Al-Qasimi when we come back. Welcome back. You're watching One-on-One. We're speaking with Emirati explorer and adventurer Ilham Al-Qasimi. You made a major decision to undertake something that was really quite unique for you. It made you the first Arab woman to reach the North Pole and the first UAE national. And of course, it put you under a huge amount of duress, physical duress, getting up to the North Pole. Tell me where that idea first came from.
I think it was pretty much a perfect storm. It was the right time in my life. I had dreamt of it years before, but I was probably too young, too inexperienced, had not, learned the lessons the hard way quite yet, was needed to focus on my career, had just finished graduate school, and, the elements weren't really lining up correctly. A part of me just thought, I need something that really pushes me literally to my limit, and it wasn't coming to me. For about 6 months I was thinking about it, and eventually I thought, wow, I dreamt about that ages ago, and I discarded the idea without ever looking at whether I could. Maybe I can.
How did you convince your parents?
It always starts with my father, because he's like a friend, and so it's supremely important to me that he understands and is supportive of everything that I do, and I appreciate, that I was really pushing his boundaries at this point. I had already said I wanted to do graduate school, and I had pursued an international career, and he had been supportive all along the way. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? He's probably thinking it's time for her to come home, and I'm instead saying I want to go to the top of the world. So I sat down with him and appealed to the adventurer in him, to the part of him that loves exploring and appreciates nature, and just talked to him about why he appreciated that, and sort of pulled him into a space where he could empathize with what I was feeling and what I wanted out of the expedition. I sort of said, can you imagine that maybe one of your children has inherited this characteristic from you? And he laughed and he said, yeah, I think the daughter of mine that keeps traveling, the one that doesn't keep coming home. And I said, okay, I agree, fine, fair enough. And, but you understand why I am this way? And he said, yes. So then I said, okay, what do you think about me, pursuing that passion? He said, well, if you want to go to the north, to the moon, I would support you. In fact, I'd go with you. And then we laughed about it, and I was like, are you serious? Are you just saying that because you know that flights to the moon are not available? And he said, when they are available, we'll go. And then I said, okay, well then I guess the North Pole is kind of closer, so you're comfortable with that? What are you talking about? No way. It's dangerous. How can you go there? Who will accompany you? You'll have to take your brother with you. And all this started coming out. And then, so it was that journey of being patient and helping him understand what I saw, what I had learned, and demonstrating to him that I had done a whole lot of work, that this is a responsible decision. It was not a wild, I want to go do this and I have no idea how I'm going to do it type journey.
What about your mother then?
My mother, I don't think she fully understood what I was doing when I first told her, and when she first said, okay, that's great. She sort of said, are you going to plant the UAE flag there? And I said, yes. And she said, okay then, that's great. But, she did not, I think she thought I was going on a cruise or something like this. And as time went by, she grew more worried, and there was a lot of conversations I had with her to try and appease her worry. And some of the questions I answered 5 times because it wasn't a real question. It was just her worry coming in. And I appreciate I don't have a daughter that said to me I want to go to the North Pole, so I can never understand how hard it must have been for her to be so supportive, but she was.
Interesting listening to you talk about that journey. Soon after you returned, you said you gave yourself lots of carrots and sticks to help you along the way. One of them was a list of comments from your friends to keep you going. Take me through that, the first stages of the journey. What happened on that trip? The initial impact of landing there, because you went unsupported. You went with no powered vehicles or anything like this, so it was even more challenging. Explain to me what happened that first day getting there and the initial reaction you had.
Well, to understand that, I have to take a step back and talk about the mental preparation. I was probably physically prepared for it far before I stopped training, but at some point, I think in mid-March, I realized actually the mental challenge is becoming more and more important. And so there are a number of techniques that I had used to try and prepare myself mentally. Like I'd taken a permanent marker, and the places that I would look at unknowingly, like aside from a journal, when I was tired, for example, under the laces of my boots, when I'm taking them off, I wrote little notes to myself in the permanent marker to remind myself why I'm there and that I'm going to be just fine. And the other things are mental exercises. You know, there are even things like doing complicated math in my head when I don't want to think about how many more steps I have to take. When I landed, there was a profound amount of excitement. It was a little bit surreal because I can't really describe what it feels like to know you're absolutely alone, and that you have a few people there, and you will rely on each other and trust each other to survive together in that environment, and that there's no safe haven, there's no cabin that you can make it to if you walk. It's just what you have in your sleds. It was fantastic.
So take me through then the first time you really felt this is a serious challenge.
I think when I stopped at camp on day 2, there's just a profound amount of respect for nature and its power, and you can't think I'm going to train really hard and I know I can do this. You actually don't know till you get there what you're capable of. Truth is, you're probably capable of more than you think, but your mind creates the block. And on the second day, when I hit an energy low, it was not physical. My arms were fine, my legs were fine. I felt fine. It's just I had an energy low, and there was a mental degradation into a negative spiral of questioning my capabilities.
When you look back on the days it took to get to the North Pole, and you did it in record time, you actually you were faster than expected.
Yeah.
By a couple of days, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you look at that time, what was the most challenging thing about it for you when you look back?
There was a whole lot of internal movement happening that I didn't expect. And I think being mentally liberated is so important to succeeding in that expedition and to enjoying it. It is really hard. There are some very painful times. You're very, very, very cold in certain parts of the expedition, and you can't avoid that. And eventually, how comfortable can a sleeping bag be? And you're sleeping in the same clothes you've been wearing for 10 days, and they don't exactly smell like flowers. And it's not easy. But if you carry mental baggage, you will focus on those difficult parts. And so it's ever so important to let go of all the mental baggage, all the hang-ups that you are holding on to, even ones you don't realize you have. But you realize it out there because while you're skiing, they flash in front of you, or at least for me, that's what happened. They would cross my mind, and I would think, I am in the North Pole. I'm nowhere near X location or near X person. Why am I thinking about this? And then you realize it's because you have mental baggage. And so there was an experience of almost purging that was so important to the success of the expedition.
So which is more challenging, the physical or the mental aspect of the trip?
The mental.
Yeah. And then when you got to the pole, you had thought about leaving something. You did leave something, actually.
I did.
Tell me what it was.
I brought a bag of sand from the UAE, from the deserts just a few feet from my home, and I emptied it exactly at the North Pole, and it was very windy, so it was actually beautiful to see. And I just felt like an important part of my experience was picking something that was diametrically opposite to what I was accustomed to. It was nothing like like anything I had experienced, and yet to see myself thrive in that environment, that's what I wanted. And so, symbolic of that experience, I brought a piece of the sand to say, this is where I come from, and this is, the country's a part of the journey I've taken. And the journey from the day I was excited about the North Pole, but did not have the means, to the day that I arrived was huge. And I think bringing the sand there almost completed that journey for me.
Is there a word that describes the emotion of reaching the top of the world?
Uplifted. Uplifted, peaceful, and very humbled.
Is there any sense of anticlimax having achieved that?
I expected that, and I had lectures from my trainers about the sports psychology around achieving a huge goal, and I haven't experienced it yet because it wasn't the destination, it was the journey. And the journey it's the starting point. It's something that's really propelled me forward to another stage in my life. And I could have sort of plodded along being like, okay, what do I do now? And I feel like something's missing, but I'm not sure what it is. And so much has come out of this, personally, professionally, even socially with my society, that I really want to capitalize on, and I really want to, take by the reins and do something meaningful with. And so, no, the anticlimax isn't there.
It's very hard interviewing someone as young as yourself who's achieved something like this to talk about, legacy and so on. But when you think about, you've got plenty more things you're going to do, obviously. When you think about how you'd like to be remembered at this early age, have you set yourself any kind of targets?
I think there's a very fruitful ground in my region to leave an impact, namely because it's been so dormant for so long on a number of different levels. Half the population are women. They're half the human capital. Even as housewives, even as mothers, they are half the human capital. They shape the minds of the next generation. And what they think, what they feel, and how their characters form are equally as important as a leader in a huge corporation. And unfortunately, we've not done enough, I think, to fuel that development. I personally think these experiences, fulfilling dreams, making mistakes along the way, seeing pain, and achieving a dream anyway, are so formative to a person's character, to their ability to have their own opinions rather than take on the opinions of people around them. And I really think that's what's missing. And if ever I could leave a legacy, it would be to really follow your dreams and appreciate the journey. It's not just about dreams or being great. It's about being a constructive and contributing member of your society. And I think that's what I would encourage. And if I had a young granddaughter and she heard that and she appreciated it and she acted on it, then I'd be pretty peaceful.
Ilham Al-Qasmi, thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.